I brought you to this place to demonstrate what happens when organizations do not develop employees. This huge vacant lot, several football fields in length and width, was once the site of a world-class factory producing some of the finest magazines in the U.S. With thousands of employees and state-of-the-art presses, it was considered can't miss. By all insider accounts, it deteriorated into competing factions and internal turf wars. The foundations ultimately crumbled under the weight of mistrust. When organizations do not develop their employees, the results are visual and often quite stark. They leave behind twisted steel and twisted lives. The 21st century belongs to the swift. Organizations of the future will be lean and agile, able to make decisions on the fly. 24/7 is a reality. It will no longer be the big eating the little, but the fast eating the slow. As companies move to just-in-time inventory from the old just-in-case approach, many do not realize how much more tension that puts onto the system. Decision-making must move from waiting on the corner office to instantaneous adjustment at the bayonet level. Like the military in times of war, each unit must be fast and flexible. Fast companies can exist only if their core values include developing people. The issue is culture. Why have automotive's big three struggled unsuccessfully for 2 decades trying to duplicate the Toyota production system? Why have computer manufacturers failed to copy the superior Dell business model? Both are widely documented. It's all about culture. If developmental leadership is not part of your organizational DNA, you will not succeed. Those companies with cultural barriers to wide sharing of needed information simply cannot operate at net speed. Soon there will be but 2 categories, the quick and the dead. I'm Jerry Duff. I've studied and practiced, written about and taught leadership for nearly 30 years. My experiences have carried me from the poverty-stricken plazas of Haiti to the executive suites of the Fortune 100, from a great feast celebrating the end of a successful project in the high bush country of Swaziland to managing in a world-class manufacturing plant. From the rainforest, a gift from my friends, the Dominicans, the Caramindians, to the great universities of the U.S. There's one lesson that stands out. Real leaders develop followers. I want to introduce the developmental leadership model. This model applies to profit and the nonprofit sector, manufacturing and service, U.S. or international, high or low tech, and equally well for parents. The principles of good leadership are universal regardless of the culture or the setting. So think in terms not only of your work, but also your family as you consider opportunities to improve. First, let me give you an overview before getting into detail. Notice that there are 4 leader styles: training, coaching, counseling, and partnering. The most effective leader approach or style depends on the development of the follower. Now, I choose the term follower instead of employee simply because many of you are involved in the nonprofit or the volunteer sector, and most of you are parents. Followers, then, are categorized as learner, player, associate, and partner. Now, each of the development levels is made up of attitude and ability, or perhaps confidence and competence. Followers develop as they make gains in one or both. Now, the objective of real leaders is to develop the followers to the full partner role in the organization. Just as no healthy parent wants their child to be forever dependent, organizations remain healthy only as they develop their people. Now, there are 2 main assumptions, huge, somewhat hidden meta-assumptions. First, each style is equally concerned with task completion and employee development. Some of you may recognize that really as Doug McGregor's theory why. People want to do a good job and are motivated to do so. Second, your organization's recruiting practices are robust. Now, that implies that you're capable of screening and attracting those folks that fit your organizational culture. Hierarchical command and control can only cease if your people are motivated and capable. For years, I've referred to that as Duff's Law. E minus A equals D. Empowerment minus alignment is a disaster. Now, each leader style is made up of two sets of behaviors, directive and supportive. Now, directive behaviors includes things like roles and goals, deadlines, checking, showing, telling, organizing, prioritizing. Support, on the other hand, is demonstrated by behaviors such as praise, asking, listening, helping, reassuring, encouraging, praising. Did I mention praising? How many of you think your boss appreciates you too much? Remember that regardless of the leader behavior, there's no less concern for the growth of the individual than for the success of the task. This was first demonstrated by a man by the name of Robert Freed Bales in the 50s, and it has been verified worldwide in the effective SIMLOG approach. The concern is simply played out differently depending on the development level of the follower or the team. Now let's get specific. Number one, training style. Training is made up of very high directive behaviors, show and tell, and low supportive behaviors. Now, low here refers to frequency rather than amount. Because remember, the whole model is based on developing the follower. Theory Y, never theory X. Now, at this point, the follower or learner has a very positive, even enthusiastic attitude, but low ability or competence. I sometimes refer to this as the puppy stage. They are so excited to be there. They are running around all over the place, peeing on themselves. Your role is to train. Great leaders are great trainers. Nobody wants to fail. They simply don't know how to succeed. Now, let's look at 4 applications where training is the appropriate style. First, a person that's eager and anxious to succeed, but low in competence. In other words, they know that, but not know how. For example, new person, someone right out of school. Second scenario, an emergency. Now, suppose I'm involved in a serious accident. The ambulance rolls up and the EMTs rush up to me, and the first thing they say is, "Ooh, let's form a committee." No! I need structure. I need somebody in charge. I may go into shock. Have any of you ever had the experience of being the first person at an accident scene? I have a vivid memory rushing across 3 lanes of traffic on I-75 to be the first person, unfortunately, at a blaze that had just crashed into the guardrail. I opened the door, and behind the wheel was a lady totally devoid of color with a death grip on the wheel. I knew I had to do something. So I took a deep breath. In my most calm voice, I said to her, "Ma'am, don't worry about a thing. I'm a doctor. I'm going to take care of you." Hey, PhD, MD, it's all the same. Don't worry about it. Now, third, whenever you have very short time frames, training is still the most appropriate. But if you're thinking at all, you're probably saying, duh, the time frames are always short, and they're getting shorter. I mean, 24/7. If my boss wanted it tomorrow, she'd ask for it tomorrow. Just in time is just management's latest cruel whip. So in order to solve that paradox, let's consider a question. When is an emergency not an emergency? Sounds like something out of Philosophy 101 or some kind of trick question, doesn't it? So let me again paint you a vivid word picture. Think emergency room doctor. No matter what is thrown at them, they respond. Without anger, without emotion, they're detached, they're under control, there's no panic. Even if the patient's pumping blood all over the floor. I mean, why do they respond so controlled under life and death situations? Whether it's a freeway accident or a burst appendix, they're highly trained, highly motivated, experienced, fully developed. For them, an emergency is routine. To use a highly directive style would be counterproductive. Now that fact has significant implications in our 24/7 just-in-time inventory worlds. Without highly trained, highly motivated, highly experienced people at all levels, the organization shuts down waiting. Fourth application where training is the most appropriate is where you have a tenured employee on a new assignment. Now this can vary from a simple overtime situation in manufacturing, for example, to, well, any rotation of assignment in any business. What we do instead is what one author called the leave alone zap leadership. Wait till they make a mistake, and nail them. That brings us to a seldom discussed but an incredibly costly and really a dehumanizing kind of problem in the work environment. What happens if a leader uses the wrong leader style? What happens if the leader uses the wrong approach? If the leader fails to correctly match their style to the development level of the person, we have what I call a mismatch. Now, for instance, suppose you had a leader using a training style with a highly developed follower, let's say an associate. What happens? Regression. Hey, if you treat me like a dummy, I'll give you a dummy. Mine is not the reason why. Mine is just a file and die. I mean, don't bother asking. It makes no sense anyway. Now, regression takes on two very distinct forms. The young, the mobile, the well-educated, the future A players, they quit and leave. That's expensive. The mid-career person with family or community ties quits and stays. That's real expensive. Roadies, the military calls them, retired on active duty. Their best efforts now go into the church, the club, the garden, the roses, the hot rod, the second job. Now, there's nothing wrong with any one of those except your organization is now getting second best. Leftovers. You can't compete in this century with quit and stay employees. Real leaders develop followers. It's not optional. Let's move to number 2, coaching style leadership. Now, coaching is made up of high directive behaviors and high supportive behaviors. It's named for the coaching profession. It's what you see when you watch the best coaches, whether it's the Little League or the NCAA Division 1A colleges. Coaching is every bit as active as training. What changes is the frequency of support. Perhaps the most underrated tool for developing people is listening. Now, suppose that I never took the time to listen to you. I never asked you a question. What am I implying by my actions?
You do not value me as a person.
Then my opinions aren't important.
That I really don't matter much.
Conversely, what does it say if I really listen to you? Pretty important skill, wouldn't you say? Emotionally intelligent leaders know this intuitively. Parents, listen. Really listen to your kids. Coaching style is used for people with some knowledge, but not a complete mastery of the task or subject. Players, in other words. People are getting better, but need encouragement. Praise, so simple, yet it's given so infrequently. Catch people doing something right. Thank you. You did a great job. Hey, I appreciate it. Way to go. Nice job. We are all motivated by positive comments from those we value. Whether it's a parent, a coach, an executive, or a trusted family friend, we never outgrow the warm glow that follows a sincere compliment. Now, by the way, coaching also works with the person who's doing very well with your training style. Now, wait. If someone is doing very well, why would I ever bother to change my approach? Well, first, I've got other things to do. And second, my objective is to grow people. Now, people can't grow if I continue to micromanage. Simply put, if you aren't teaching, you aren't leading. Now, remember, the follower at the player level has a sustainably positive attitude and is developing competence and ability. Third approach, the counseling, or some prefer mentoring leader, consisting now of very high supportive behaviors and low directive behaviors. Mentoring works best with the employee with a high degree of competence but lower confidence. The associate who may not be used to acting on their own, or the whole idea of the freedom to act or empowerment. Should I go ahead? Am I allowed? Who should I ask? What if I make a mistake? Maybe I should just sit here and wait till somebody tells me what to do. When firms attempt to move from a highly directive style to a more supportive team approach, most are absolutely shocked and unprepared for the 2 years it takes to make this cultural transition, especially those that have sponsored Program of the Month for the past couple of decades. Now, what distinguishes counseling is what the late Carl Rogers called unconditional positive regard. Rogers, who was once honored by the APA as the most effective counselor of all time, believed that people had answers within themselves, but they needed a positive, affirming climate in order to make that decision. Now, what characterizes counseling or mentoring is often subtle. How do you respond to a question? Suppose an employee with a question approaches you. The employee is competent and motivated, loyal to the organization and their craft. In fact, you probably feel that they even have the answer. How do you handle the question? You turn it back to them. What do you think? What would you do? Has it happened before? Did it work then? When the follower is gently guided to their own answer, they feel good about themselves and about you, the leader. Now follow that up with praise. Great job. Hey, you don't need to come back here again. Way to go. Nice job. I'm here if you need me, but... Now let's look at a mismatch. Same scene, same employee, same question, only this case the leader uses the wrong style. She tells him what to do. What happens? Regression. The follower may even develop an unhealthy dependence on the leader or the boss. They no longer have to think they can take no responsibility for the outcomes. A mentality begins to creep in. Hey, I just work here. All pays the same. Gallup poll of over 1 million employees put industry average at only 25% of employees actively engaged in the business. 55% were disengaged and 20% fully regressed. For a rough and conservative approximation of what that cost your organization, multiply the total number of employees times the average salary plus benefits and divide the result by 10. For even a small firm, it can run as high as $500,000. And Fortune 500, the number is in the tens of millions. And that is every year. The days are over when your organization can win with the heroic efforts of a few at the top, coupled with the half-hearted mindsets of the masses below. The marketplace moves way too fast for command and control. Get rid of all managers who don't see their primary function as developing followers before they destroy your organization. Jack Welch, reflecting on his incredibly successful tenure at GE, summed it up this way. The number one thing we're trying to do here is to create and nourish high-performing teams. That's what leadership is. Now, why do leaders respond incorrectly? First, time. Under the pressure of immediate deadlines, we often take a shortcut. Telling is faster than developing. However, it comes back to haunt us 1,000 times because underdeveloped employees prevent us from moving quickly. It's really easy to spot organizations that don't value their people in spite of some convoluted vision statement tacked up on the wall in the lobby. They have piles of inventory just sitting and waiting just in case. Now, a second reason for incorrect leader style is decidedly less admirable: power. There's an addicting feeling of power when I answer someone's question. It gives me a sense of superiority, of worthiness, or perhaps a false sense of security. It may even be what I was taught a manager does. And yet, as a servant leader, I'm only worthy as I develop others. The result of a mismatch, for whatever reason, is the same: quit. Quit and go, quit and stay. You can't compete. Now, a second application where counseling is also the most appropriate approach is when you have a fully developed follower at the partner level that has regressed, someone who no longer cares. Now, what causes regression in this otherwise highly developed person? What causes regression?
They get shot down.
They get laid off.
They've been passed over before.
No one else cares. Why should I?
And don't forget, there's another whole set of personal issues that sometimes come into play. Hey, my wife just ran off with my best friend, and I miss him. Some years ago, I was working with a client who found himself in an all-out war with his teenage daughter. I mean, he clearly loved his daughter, but was worried sick, fearing the absolute worst. After a few joint sessions, I asked him to come in and see me alone. I explained to him the developmental leadership model and told him that by using this highly directive style, he might cause his daughter to regress even further. He got angry and defensive. He shouted, "I'm not the problem! She's the problem!" I calmly responded, You've got a choice to make. A choice that may profoundly affect the rest of your life. Do you want to be right? Or do you want to have a relationship? He looked away and tried to hide it. But I noticed a tear fall from his eye. Now let's move to style 4, the partnering leader. Now, this is not passive delegating, some uninvolved absentee management, kick your feet up and read the Wall Street Journal arrogance. And it's not out of touch PowerPoint conference room jockeys making yet another glitzy and clueless presentation. It's active partnering, characterized by low directive behaviors and low supportive behaviors. Now, at this point, you're no longer just adding to your effectiveness. You're multiplying. You're doing your most important work. You're developing others. In my book, I call this leader making. The best models may be law firms or medical partnerships, maybe consulting groups, or look at that all-volunteer mega church in your community. Now, it may be a bit counterintuitive, but partnering is actually the most difficult style to implement because it requires not only highly developed followers, but a leader so competent they can stay in touch without micromanaging. Now, what happens if a leader loses touch? A mismatch. Remember, mismatch can occur at any level of the follower development, but the results are always the same, regression. Finally, let's look at what I've called over the years the bitterness measure. The distance between your employee or volunteer's perceived competence and their perceived contribution is the measure of their bitterness. Let me give you an example. Suppose you've got an employee who's now 50-ish, hired in the early 70s with a degree in philosophy. Now, a BA in philosophy in the early 70s gets you no job. So he goes to work on the assembly line expecting to only stay a few weeks. But he can't quit. The money's too good. No one in 30 years has listened to him. And now he's working for a 25-year-old MBA. How bitter do you think he is toward the organization? In their book, Creative Destruction, the authors make this conclusion. Unless companies change at the pace and scale of the market, their performance will almost inevitably slide into mediocrity. Speed and change demands developed employees. For the new century, leadership is developmental, not situational.